I have some complaints, and these complaints are not levied at my community specifically. These are complaints that I am levying against basically the internet as a whole, which is not the most healthy way to do things, but I am a-okay with doing that if it means that I can, you know, be very, very truthful with how I feel. Sylvie says, I'm tired as fuck, kind of worried about how you've been. I personally am okay. But that said, sorry for anything I did to contribute. Oh, no, Gideon, you're fine. Like I said, it's not you specifically. It is a general idea, a general problem that we are going to go ahead and call a lack of curiosity. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just turn on this. Okay, sure. I love when the TV does not turn on, even though I have set it on. There we go. Okay, much better. Much better. So, what do I mean by a lack of curiosity? Well, let me paint an idea for you. Let me paint a scenario, which is not entirely fictitious, and that is kind of my problem, actually. Let's say that you are on the right side of a problem. Let's say that you, personally, are having a debate with somebody, and you know for a fact that you are correct. You know that your position is morally correct, it is historically correct, it's everything, it's perfect. However, none of the details about why you're correct on it are actually right. Now, that may require a little bit of contextualizing, so let me give you an example. Let's say, for instance, that you say slavery is wrong. And you know what? We can agree. Slavery's wrong. It's bad. It's horrible. It's not something that we should endorse in any way, shape, or form. But then the reason that you came to the conclusion that slavery is wrong is because you... What's the best way to put this? You were a black nationalist and you believe that black people have genetic superiority over white people, and just as a result of that, you believe that they shouldn't be enslaved because we should all be keeping to our own nations, and actually just trying to have mixed races is a bad idea. There are some of you who are going to hear that and think, that's not a real person. Cirrus, you're making a person up. You are doing the thing where the guy on the internet gets mad at a person that they made up. The problem is I've just described the black nationalist Hotep movement. And granted, I know that I'm missing some of the nuances of it, but by and large, any black nationalist movement is going to look kind of sort of like that, because it's just white nationalism, but the other way around. Jasta says, that's too much, but I know it's real. Right. So where does this come in with the lack of curiosity? So let's say that, again, you are on that side. You are anti-slavery. It is bad, but the reason that you have is that. And you refuse to accept any counter information about racial superiority. The fact that there's no such thing as it. Even the idea of races that we have right now is entirely fictitious and made the fuck up. There's more genetic diversity in a handful of people from the same race as there are from the made-up races when you go from, like, that one's Caucasian, and that one is black, and that one is Mongol. No, not really. Like, that's not how humanity actually works. You're taking a bunch of phenotypes and pretending that actually makes a whole race. It's not really how any of this works. And it's a great way to divide us instead of actually having us united. But you don't take any of that information, you don't take any information that says that you might be wrong into account. You just are a superiority person on the other end. Now, there's another version of this that I have actually heard. I've actually talked with K-Fox about being frustrated about this particular one. It is the person who says that they are right on trans issues because they themselves are trans, or that gives them some type of insight into Marxism, as an example, which we've actually seen on the channel. Somebody use that as their argument, like, hey, this person is my trans friend, so I trust them on Marxism. What the fuck does their dysphoria have to do with the Marxism part of that? So, what this is, to me, is people who are willing to be as far as they can tell, on what they think is the right side of an issue, but they are unwilling to explore why it is the right side of an issue. They are merely content with being morally correct. And I'm going to just go ahead and say right now, I have no use for that person. Like, whomever operates that way, whether it is in regards to race or what have you, I think that that is a person who is as useless as a doomer. Because the person who has that personality trait, that method of operating, is very likely to be confidently wrong later because they are unwilling to explore why they are correct right now. The thing that clued me in to this being a problem, like, and to a lesser degree in my community, is the AI thing. We can all agree on a handful of principles, right? Fuck AI. We can agree that it's predatory. We can agree that it steals. We can agree that it's wasteful. We can agree that it is a thing being toted to us by billionaires who are trying to find a use case that simply doesn't need to fucking exist. We can agree on all of that. All of that's fine. But then the minute somebody says, yeah, and it's draining the national water supply, I want to pull my fucking hair out. I want to pull the actual particulates of calcium in my skull and build a fucking bit of drywall with them. I can't. Because the minute you say that, you have admitted to me, in no uncertain terms, that you are willing to be confidently right because you are on what you consider to be the moral side of something, but you are unwilling to do any research as to why. And that person is not just kind of useless, also really, really fucking dangerous. Because that's the kind of person who can be convinced by rhetoric. That's the kind of person who will not look into a claim, will not see if it actually lines up with scrutiny, and will simply accept that they are on the right side of an issue and try to use that as justification for X, Y, or B. And that person scares me. Because that is a person who is largely incredibly hard to reason with. Because they're morally correct. And it may be very easy for them to even demonstrate that they're morally correct, but they won't. And that's frustrating. So, like, in order of how I've talked about this, on the slavery thing, why is slavery wrong? Well, because every human being is equal or should be equal, and there is no arbitrary metric by which we should say one is more superior to another. As a result, none of us should be enslaved to one another under a similar metric. Easy peasy. Doesn't require you to do anything about how actually your race deserves to be the ones in charge. Marxism. Why do I believe in being a socialist? It's not because I think that we're morally correct, though I think there's certainly a bit of that. It's because I am a scorned worker, and I have spent the majority of my time recognizing that the people above me are just as inept as the people below me in any hierarchical structure, so I would really like any hierarchy that I'm dealing with at a job to be able to demonstrate that it actually fucking matters. And the best way to do that is by letting everybody get hired democratically. And oh wait, that's just socialism. That's what that is. It's the workers owning the means of production. It's democratic operations within workplaces. That's boom. There we go. And now with the AI water thing. AI is responsible for 0.3% of the national water supply usage. In the United States, where we are the most wasteful with it, that's nothing. That is a blip on a fucking radar. If you want to use the water argument, you need to research what the argument is and the actual mechanics of why the argument works or doesn't work. Here's the actual water argument. Here's the one that actually fucking matters if you're so desperate to use it. People like Peter Thiel, Sam Altman, Elon Musk, when they try to get data centers built, they tend to build them in areas that already have restricted water access. The problem isn't water is being used and therefore we're running out or some shit. No, we're not. That's not how water fucking works. No, the problem is that where these data centers are being built are strangulating the resources in those areas. Let me add another thing on that. Let me add just one more thing into that as well, in order to make it abundantly clear why I'm even talking about this. Did you know that because of the AI, I don't want to say boom because that implies that, I mean, we know that that's what's happening, but I kind of wish that all of it just fucking burned down tomorrow. But because of the AI boom, that fucking thing, because of that, we are in a situation where NVIDIA, for all of their faults, has developed new dry cooling technology specifically for the purpose of cooling AI data centers without having to use so much potable water. Now, why are they having to use that? Well, it's because AI is not as inevitable as people fucking think. And when we look at how these data centers are built and how they are ran, we can see the problems, but you can only really see those problems if you are actively researching why they are bad. What is the actual problem there? Well, the problem is twofold. The problem is, one, thanks to the systems that we live in, capitalism, there are not proper incentives for doing things ethically or doing them right. We simply care about doing them quickly. We basically fix that entire problem. That one at least. Not every problem that this technology has, but we fix that problem with regulation. You can't really destroy the entire thing without, physically going and blowing up the data centers. And I'm not saying that that's not on the table. I'm saying that that is not an option that most people are willing to do, and that is not an option that is going to work at scale as of right now with what infrastructure we have. But regulation works. Regulation's helpful. Regulation says, oh, yeah, no, here's this exact problem with this technology. Let's address the problem. But you can only address that problem if you are willing to do even the basest amount of research to figure out what the problem was. And that is a very frustrating thing to deal with day in and day out when it comes to anything. Atheism is another thing, right? I'm an atheist. I believe that being an atheist is actually not more moral, that's not the right word, but I believe that it is more consistent with the reality that I observe. But let's say, for instance, that you're an atheist because you just think that it's cool and edgy and you would like to be different. Now, that's not that many people. I am mostly describing a high schooler at this point. But I can still be frustrated at the high schooler. Tzor says, counterpoint, I don't see many people say that water usage is just brute water usage, and most of the argument that you pointed out, where it's often taking water from communities that are already struggling to get enough of it. Right, but Tzor, I don't care that it's often that you see that. I'm telling you the argument that I see. I see AI poisons the water supply. It doesn't. I see AI is leading to us having a shortage. It's not. It's not how cooling works. If that was, nuclear power would poison the fucking water too. Because we do water cooling for that. So what do we actually do to fight against that? Well, we say, hey, if you're going to build these things until the bubble pops, then we fight for regulation. We fight so that you can't scrape and steal people's artwork with it. We fight so that you can't steal the local water supply and instead have to rely on closed loop and other cooling technologies. The argument, just delete all of it, isn't going to work because none of us have the leverage to make that happen. But you know what we do have the leverage to do? We do have the leverage to force these things to comport with even the most basic standard of ethics. Tzor says, I'm not saying the argument doesn't exist. Right, I don't care then. My argument is not about the scale to which it is happening. My argument is that it happens and that frustrates me. Period. Said also bullshit on the nuclear counter. Have you watched the Hank Green video on how data center cooling happens? Like, have you done that? Have you actually done that? Because we did this thing with whether buying booster packs said post numbers on how much water nuclear uses. That's not what I'm arguing. What I'm arguing is against the AI poisons the water supply argument. And if that argument held weight, then so would nuclear power. But that's not what happens. We don't poison the water when we are doing that because we can treat the water afterwards. We have to. And in closed loop systems, we definitely have to. Tzor says, can you demonstrate that? Can I demonstrate that? Can I demonstrate that myself? Okay, hold on. All right, so let's go point by point. Okay? Let's start with claim. The claim, and this is from cleanwater.org. This is from a publication from there. So let's look at the claim here. Data centers and PFAS, a dangerous combination. Data centers use a variety of chemicals in their cooling systems. Chemicals that contaminate water as it works through the data center cooling system. Things like refrigerants, cooling loop chemicals, and water treatment chemicals. One of the cooling loop chemicals that it is talking about is ethyl glycol. It says a clear, odorless, flammable, and toxic liquid that is used in antifreeze and other products. Right. This is true. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the nuclear power plant real quick. Put a pin There's your claim for AI poisoning water supply and the specific way that the claim is formulated. Now, this right here is an entire chapter on how nuclear power plants receive their water, treat their water. Now, what type of chemicals are we worried about for AI data centers? We are worried about cooling loop chemicals. We are worried about chemicals that are corrosion inhibitors. And we are worried about refrigerants. These are the chemicals that we are worried about. Now, remember, my claim is not that these are the exact same thing, but my claim is that these are close enough to one another to be analogous. So, real quick, let's go ahead and take a look. This is the conclusion area, but it is one of the areas to talk about corrosion. Water quality has long been an important factor in nuclear power plant operation. A proper water chemistry program is important for the safe operation of power plants. It ensures the integrity, reliability, and availability of the main plant structures, systems, and equipment that are essential for safety by the assumptions and intentions of that design. Water is used as working and cooling liquid in power plants. The chemistry of water coolants and corrosion concerns is particularly important in nuclear power plants. As a result, water regime for commercially waterly cooled equipment must be created to prescribe the values of water quality parameters such as, and it's the pH, electrical conductivity, all that's right there. You can read it. Chloride content, alkalinity, silica, heavy metal content. Hence, this chapter has been undertaken to study the water characteristics of nuclear power plants. So let us go ahead and take a look. I believe it was here. So how do they go about doing that? What's the method that they use? Well, 2.1 in this chapter. This chapter briefly describes all experimental observations that are presented in the form of numerical data to the individual samples used in the current experiments. It is representing the study on the analysis of water quality of the source waters and the recommended value of boiler water in nuclear power plants and secondary circuit reactors. The deviations between the obtained values and the recommended values are briefly discussed in the following section. Before and after treatment, several water quality parameters such as pH, electrical conductivity, the same stuff that we read in the conclusion, are all meticulously monitored. Then, to utilize for power generation, we picked the optimal condition and best quality for each source water. So, for cooling in the nuclear power plant, depending on where it is being used, there is a different purification method that is needed to be used for the water specifically. And I believe that it even mentions here the different types of filtration that are required. Activated carbon filters, which use strong interaction and desorption to remove chlorine and soluble organic substances from the water. Ultrafiltration employs a membrane that is essentially represented by RO systems, with the exception that holes in the ultrafilter are somewhat bigger. Pyrogenes and other big chain biological substances or organic compounds such as RNAs are removed from cleaned water used as an ultrafilter. Ultraviolet oxidations, electrodialysis. Basically, there is a way that the water needs to be when it enters the power plant, because we can't let the water corrode things. We can't let the water exceed, it actually says in here, I believe, that the water can't exceed 374 degrees. Let me double check that. No, that was something that I read in a different publication. But you can Google for yourself if you want to. There is a point at which water can no longer cool a nuclear rod. And I believe, if memory serves, it was 300 some odd degrees is about when it is not able to cool it anymore. Feel free to fact check me on that one. That's the one that I remember off of my brain. So we know that anti-corrosion chemicals are added to the water during treatment. We know that coolant chemicals have to be added to the water during treatment in order to make sure that it does not supersede that 300 some odd degree that is needed so that we are able to cool those rods. Now, let's take that pin and let's go back to the AI shit. Why do you have a banner that's that big? Fuck it. Anybody that has a banner this big that doesn't allow me to get rid of it is just forcing me to use screen real estate. Data centers use advanced water-based cooling, including liquid immersion cooling, direct-to-chip liquid cooling. Filtered water is essential to avoid damage to delicate cooling systems. Water is pumped directly to cold plates on chips. Ultra-pure. By the way, this is the reason why there are different methods used between the two. Because in one, we are cooling rods and various bits of machinery, whereas here we are instead trying to get something that can hit, silicon. Immersion cooling systems. Some use dielectric fluids, others use water as secondary loops. Filtration ensures the water in secondary loops stays free of debris and particulates. AI centers still often use chilled water systems with cooling water. Water is filtered to remove sediment, scale, and organics. This is going to be the same method, generally, that is being used over here. There's even a diagram for it there. But the part here where it's talking about carbon filtration, trying to get it to where that actually is. You know, we're just going to do Control F. Fuck it. I am bad at scanning documents. So instead, yeah, this is akin to the activated carbon filtration that we would be using here. Treated to avoid biofouling and corrosion. Okay, well, we know that corrosion is also something that we're treating when it comes to nuclear power plants, though again, the techniques differ because we are cooling different things. But biofouling, what is that? Well, it's the undesirable accumulation of microorganisms, algae, plants, and small animals on any human-made surface. Okay, well, is that something that we also do during treatment at a nuclear power plant? Oh, by the way, it is something that we treat in the power plant because if you look at 2.1.6, ultraviolet oxidation. Ultraviolet oxidation is used to kill bacteria by emitting ultraviolet light with a biocidal wavelength of 245. I don't know what the NN stands for because I'm an idiot. It also splits and ionizes some organics, which are then removed by polishing the loop's deionization and organic absorption cartridges. In modern water purification techniques, ultraviolet filtering is widely used for drinking water. So the same needs are there, by and large, between the two. The same needs are there between the two in order to engage in cooling. The methods differ because, well, again, we are cooling different things. But largely we are doing the same thing. We are treating with similar chemicals, and the chemicals that we are treating with do the same thing across the two. The methods may be slightly different, but the end result is the same. We have a certain level of treatment that water needs to go onto in order to enter a facility and be useful for cooling. And then we have a separate type of treatment that needs to be done to that water so that it will still be usable by people afterwards. For that, to minimize environmental impact, AI centers may reuse gray water or rainwater or use ultrafiltration or reverse osmosis to clean the water before reuse. Now, this is for closed loop systems. Now, the reason that frustrates me is because we have now dry cooling technology from NVIDIA, and we have closed loop systems. The fact that we still try to use open systems for making sure that these centers stay cool baffles the fuck out of me. And it baffles the fuck out of me because we have two more sustainable options that are available and being used in our own fucking country. And yet, for some reason, I know the reason, and you know the reason, we all know the exact reason, it's cheaper to just grab the water from a river and then treat it and then have it go through and then treat it on the way back out. And you know how we have to fight against that? We fight against that by lobbying. We fight against that by protesting. We fight against that by making it incredibly inconvenient for any data center to try to run in those cheap methods. Now, granted, this does nothing to address the stealing of people's data. This does nothing to address the unethical ways in which these machines steal artwork, steal IP, steal ideas, steal anything that you've written, steal your own medical shit. This does nothing to address any of that. That is a separate issue. But in order to fight any of this effectively, you need to be willing to just take a moment to learn about how this shit works. Because when you know how this shit works, even at a base level, you know where the actual problems lie. And when you know where the actual problems lie, you become infinitely better at lobbying against them. You become a better communicator about them. Zora says, or the electrical bills, or infrasound, or the... Right, so the sound issues are largely solved by choosing better locations. But again, we choose locations based on what is cheaper real estate, not what is cheaper real estate and what has a cheaper way to bring shit to people. And that is not good. That is not fucking sustainable. Dallas Sarah, thank you for gifting out 5 community subs. As for the electrical bills, so KFox actually fought against a data center being built near her, and one of the things that she was able to successfully lobby to make happen was forcing the data center to largely be powered by solar, making sure that it didn't eat up shit on the grid. But again, for you to know that that's a thing that you need to do, you need to take a minute to actually learn a little bit of it. And the fact that over in China that they're actually doing some of this at higher scale than we are, and they are using largely greener alternatives, which means that we have the ability to, but we're so fucking obsessed as a country with trying to beat them in the race to AGI, which we won't get with large language models, but we think that we need to race them. By the way, if you've never read I Have No Mouth But I Must Scream, this is very similar to the exact plot of that, by the way. We had a AI race with China and Russia. And then the end result of that was the systems integrating with one another and bad things happening. Genesee says, Gen AI isn't sustainable on any metric. Even if it took everything over, it would then die because there would be no more new data. Everybody would only ask the LLM. Right. Again, one of the other issues that exists with this is that they are largely scraping data, which means that there's no way for it to tell if something's true or not. And we also get the fun feedback loop as well, which is really fucking funny when an AI starts reading shit that an AI makes. Stagander says, Sam Altman, we see a future where intelligence is a utility like electricity or water, and people buy it from us on a meter. Right. And therein lies one of my biggest problems. It's twofold. It's a twofold problem. Problem number one is the particular people that are in charge of trying to push this technology. That's problem one, but problem two is the system that birthed them. Now, while we can't really overthrow capitalism tomorrow, that's not going to work. That's not going to happen. I would love it to happen, but you and I both know it's not going to happen right now. That's not a thing that we're going to be able to just make revolution happen right now and suddenly, boom, everything gets better tomorrow and we don't solve the problem of bread in the meantime. But right now, we do know that the people who are actively involved in trying to push this technology are, in no uncertain terms, evil as fucking shit. Elon Musk, actual Nazi, actual, like, white genocide apologist guy, thinks that the Great Replacement theory is a real thing that he really needs to be worried about and is obsessed with fucking birth numbers. He's very, very adjacent to certain movements that we are not going to name exactly right now, but he definitely did do the salute of one, so there we are. Altman, the idea that intelligence should not be something that is just freely given, the idea, like, so for me, I think that intelligence should be free. I think knowledge should be free. I think college should be free. I think people should be allowed to educate themselves however they want, wherever they want, and I think it should be free because I think people should be smarter. I think people would be happier if they knew more about the world around them. But if instead we have people like Sam fucking Altman who are saying, oh, well, actually, what if intelligence was able to be sold on a meter? Like, no, fuck you. I am so happy that for a brief moment in time, every CEO in America was absolutely fucking just scared as shit about one of the Mario brothers. Hoder says, Mini DC is entirely closed loop and free cooling. The loop filters are very much alive when we change them. 15 years runtime so far. Nice. Orla says, oh no, you don't want people educated. That means they'll know when you're talking bullshit as a government. How will the average person control you then? How will the average control you then? Yeah, no, like, yay, politicians. Yay. Was it Altman or was it Thiel that said that AI is going to kill us all, but in the meantime, it's going to make a whole bunch of really good companies that make a lot of money? Like, was it Thiel or Altman that did that? Because if it's Altman, then he just has all of the best quotes that say why none of them should be in charge of any of this shit. Said, yes, and we can still make the gun with everything that's in Home Depot. Yup. Tzor brought up a very good point, and that was that I was talking originally about how the water is chemically treated on the way into the power plant. And for me, showing that the chemical treatments are largely done for the same reasons and largely with many similar techniques, that's enough for me. But if you want what actually happens with water when it is taken out of a loop system, water can't exist in a loop system forever. So, 80% of any water that is used for cooling, at least specifically for data centers. I don't know the numbers for nuclear power plants, but in nuclear power plants, we are actually trying to get the steam. Like, the steam from the nuclear power plant is the actual thing we're looking for, because the steam that comes from the fuel rods doing their thing is what goes up into the turbines and generates power. That's the thing that we are looking for nuke. For data centers, though, it's 80%. For data centers, 80% of the water that is used evaporates. Goes back into the system locally where it was sourced from. But that doesn't account for the 20%. And the 20% is the area where we could worry. Now, this is where we actually have to fight very, very hard. This is the part where we have to actually fight incredible. Oh, that isn't smoke, that's steam! Steam from the steamed nuclear we're having. Steamed nuclear. Also, Tizor said that earlier, I don't apologize for being an asshole, it will happen again. I know, I'm aware, I'm gonna be an asshole too. It's okay. It's a-okay. But okay, not all water can stay in a closed loop forever. As water cycles, minerals and dissolved solids concentrate. To protect equipment and maintain efficiency, facilities periodically discharge a portion of that water. This discharged water may contain elevated total dissolved solids, corrosion inhibitors, and biocides. Again, we know that they're treated with that. We already talked about that over here. We talked about that over here, and we talked about that over here. The discharged water contains elevated total dissolved solids, corrosion inhibitors or biocides, heat, and trace metals from system materials. The trace metals part, I would imagine that we also have from the fuel rods, but that one we did not see in the paper that I was looking at, or in the book I was looking at. Anybody who actually does work a little more with nuclear could let me know if there are trace metals in the water that is taken out after that, specifically. But for then, till then, I'm not going to hit fire on a claim that I cannot support. At this point, the water is no longer suitable for reuse without treatment, depending on local infrastructure. This is where we have to fight. By the way, this is why I'm on this right now. At this point, the water is no longer suitable for reuse without treatment. Depending on local infrastructure and permit conditions, it may be sent to a municipal system, or treated on site, or hauled off for special processing. This is one area where we often become involved. Valicor, who's the people who are writing this, works with facilities that generate non-hazardous industrial wastewater, including cooling tower blowdown and related streams, to ensure that it is properly returned to the environment in compliance with regulatory standards. But there's that word right there. Regulatory standards. How do you get those regulatory standards when you're not involved in the actual infrastructure itself? Lobbying. Protesting? Lobbying. That's how you affect that. Because the treatment of that water is going to vary from place to place. And we know that one of the main ways that data centers are main ways that data centers are chosen to be built, they are chosen to be built in places where it is cheaper for them to be built and maintained. So, how do we counteract that? Well, we have to counteract that by figuring out where they are building, figure out what the regulatory standards are in that area, because that'll tell us a lot about why they're building there. There's one being built here in Georgia, I think 2 hours away from me right now, actually, that we have to do some shit with. You have to figure out what those regulatory standards are, and then fight to get them changed if they are not adequate enough to lead to you having a good water supply. The last thing you want at all is for your town to become Flint, Michigan, because some dumb fuck tech bro decided that they needed another big computer room. It said, yes, but trace metals are completely different, so it's complicatedly on disposal, and be sure to use the nice Royal Flush gang. Said Flint was from forced negligence. Right, but remember that capital is capital. It's going to look for the cheapest way to operate to do things. So I do not envision a world where Altman, Thiel, or Musk are going to be responsible enough to build these things in a way that does not cause that problem again. So what this means is there is nothing unique about a data center. There's nothing unique about a room filled with computers and server boards that poisons water in any specific way compared to what we already do with previously existing technology. Our problems are location, scale, and local regulations. By the way, if you want to completely strangle a data center, you can also do that with local regulations. If you can make the data center so expensive that they cannot operate it, eventually the thing may just shut down. And while we know that the bubble's going to burst at some point and then things are going to actually be shutting down at that point, having more of them shut down in the meantime is not a bad thing. Having more of them shut down in the meantime is actually very helpful. But you don't know how to make it happen, and you don't know how to fight against it unless you are willing to go and do a little bit of reading. And therein lies my frustration. Therein lies where my brain is sitting. I want to be on the right side of things. I do. But being on the right side of things is not my motivation. My motivation is trying to be correct. Japaju says, why read when you can be angry? Read! I know, right? I want to be correct. I am more interested in being correct than I am interested in being on the, quote, right side of an issue, because the person who determines what the right side of the issue is largely arbitrary and based on the community group that you're in. If I were in a conservative area and I were saying the things that I'm saying, very, very likely I would be seen as further left than I actually am, because for some people, regulations is just fucking communism. And that's fucking dumb. That's been dumb since Reagan. But I want people to read. I want people to learn. I want people who are on a side to learn why that side is correct, or inadvertently learn that the side is incorrect, because this has the secondary effect where if more people were doing this, if more people were fact-checking themselves, if more people were checking everything that is going on in whatever they are arguing against or for, I think we would find more people who are on the right wing of issues suddenly come over to be on the right side of issues. But I think one of the main reasons that they are not willing to do that is laziness. It's easier to be angry. It's easier to be told what to think. It's easier to be told why to think it. It's easier to say things vaguely so that everybody nods their head instead of saying specifically what you mean, such that everybody understands what you mean but can then scrutinize you on it. One of these things is easier. And that easiness is a fucking trap. Ansel says, I'm tired of people turning farmland into suburbs and trying to make desert into farmland. So I'm not angry with them trying to turn desert into farmland. That does not bother me too terribly much. I understand ecosystems changing, blah, 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 blah. We should not be calling ourselves God, blah, 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 blah. I understand. I understand. The technology to actually convert a desert into something else is still wild and cool. However, turning farmlands into suburbs is fucking dumb. It's the most... Okay, what's the best way to put this? It is the most cutting off your nose to spite your face thing. Why are you building the suburbs? To accommodate more people. Okay, so you're building the suburbs to accommodate more people. So what are you getting rid of? The people's food supply. But I thought we were trying to accommodate more people. How? What? How are we going to actually accommodate more people if we're just cutting off their fucking food supply? Like, food doesn't make it to the supermarket magically. It makes it to the supermarket because of farmers. Said, why don't we put the suburbs in the deserts? Ah, now you're thinking with portals. Although, I'm also just not a fan of suburban sprawl. I think that suburban sprawl is largely wasteful. It leads to people being more atomized, and it leads to an over-reliance on vehicles that simply does not need to exist. So try to explain that to the rich CEOs, though. Do you want me to take an hour to brush myself up on it and then go put a presentation up against a CEO? Because, like, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to read. Reading's fun. But if you get me in front of Altman, I'm not actually sure exactly what I would do. I'm not... These hands, they're very grippy is all I'm saying. They're very, very grabby. Very, very angrily grabby. Thinking with portals, don't tempt me, sir, it's nerd. Anywho, there's my spiel. If you have a position... hold on. No, I know exactly how to end this. 110%. Easily. The best way to end this possible. This video brought to you by the Socratic method. If you believe something, the next step is asking yourself why. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, you know I'm not saying that last part, Sylvie Snow, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.